Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Final Frontier podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Penaranda, and I'm joined again with another fantastic guest. His name is Dennis Gatens, and he's CEO of LEOcloud. And we're going to go over a great topic today, and he has extensive background in and out of the space industry. And with this topic, we're going to be talking about the cloud and its space applications. So without further ado, before we jump into that topic, Dennis, thank you for joining us for the show. Why don't you share with us a little bit about your background and what got you started in the space industry?
Well, Daniel, thanks for inviting me to be on your podcast. I think this is a great event and great series that really could bring the industry to a forum. What's the potential of commercial space? So thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure.
So my background, just real quick, I've been in the communications industry for many years. Started out as an engineer, electrical engineer, building fiber-based systems in the early years of fiber, and just evolved my career through just a series of opportunities to bring emerging technologies into emerging markets, primarily disruptive technologies, and found it to be obviously quite dynamic and interesting and a challenge. And so I've enjoyed being sort of in that space, if you will, throughout my career. And of course, the communications industry has evolved from circuit switch telecommunications to the cloud, basically, and a global IP infrastructure that's now heading into space, basically. And just a few years back, I realized as the commercial space industry was accelerating at a rate that was pretty incredible, and still is, that there was just going to be this natural evolution of cloud infrastructure into space, and a demand and an absolute need, because it's critical infrastructure for businesses. It's mission critical for their operations, for their overall strategies, for government and military the same, and it will be for people, astronauts and humans that reside in LEO and ultimately in cislunar and beyond. So I just saw that what we have come to refer to as the intersection of cloud and space just inevitable, and sure enough, it's here. Our approach at LEOcloud is to move the cloud into space. To date, there's been a fair bit of connectivity between terrestrial infrastructure and satellite communications infrastructure to bring cloud to all ends of the earth. There's been demonstrations of compute infrastructure on space station, for example, Spaceborne 2, a very successful demonstration. So the demand is there, the critical requirements are there, and we just feel that at LEOcloud we're on a path to enable that capability, and beginning in LEO and eventually on to other newer space edges, as we say. So
further out in the final frontier.
There you go.
So what would be some of the benefits of having the cloud in space versus traditional terrestrial method that we have today?
Well, the fundamental benefit is latency. Latency drives competitive advantage. It drives top line, bottom line advantages for companies. In space, it becomes critical to where there's zero tolerance for latency, where you need the strongest analytics and AI capabilities as close to the sources and users of data as possible, in order to provide the ability to basically exist in space. Space situational awareness, or SSA, is a very good example. There's constant monitoring of traffic and debris in space, and you have zero tolerance for latency associated with an event that has to be reported to organizations or people, humans, that need to take action as a result of some situation that appears to be on course to occur. So cloud infrastructure in LEO and then beyond will be critical for successful missions going forward.
I even think, just from my perspective, would it help it with in terms of efficiency and cooling, because you're leveraging cryogenic temperatures versus manually cooling it here on the Earth?
Well, there's the typical challenges of swap in space, size, weight, power. So you've got to work within those boundary conditions. But so there are there is thermal management required, and then there is the need to operate within the available power within a satellite or within a structure such as space station. And there will be more space stations going forward. There will be commercially owned, privately owned stations going forward, both in LEO and cislunar.
And for viewers who haven't heard what the cloud is, how would you describe it, that infrastructure and that network?
Well, so it's a virtual environment of compute and data storage that is available to enterprise organizations and end users via network connectivity, high-speed networks. So those compute and data storage resources are centrally located at data centers, and the advantage for the enterprise organization is that they're scalable and they're dynamically scalable so that customers can utilize the resources they need, and they can scale the resources they need, and they pay for what they use, versus having heavy capital investment on site or distributed across the enterprise on a global basis, for example, and then having to maintain that technology refresh, which occurs quite rapidly these days. So you outsource all that, your CapEx becomes an OpEx, and you're consuming it, you're paying for it on a consumption basis. So it's a more efficient, more cost-effective method for the edge compute, the computing and the data storage resources that you need to run your operation. So if you think of it, basically taking all that capability that you might have in-house and just using it on a as needed basis from a third party, that's the cloud.
What is edge computing?
Computing is the compute resources, where enterprise organizations and users run their applications or workloads. So they move their applications into the cloud, into a compute environment, and their applications, whether it's transaction-based applications for whatever services you're providing, video streaming services, any business application that you need to run your business is hosted in a computing environment.
What would be some example of use cases for edge computing in space?
So edge compute in space, we look at it from a broad range of market segments, both commercial and government. For governments, you provide the ability to have resources that are reachable globally via single satellite hop. So you now have edge compute or cloud resources at the edge available to you with the lowest latency, high level of security, and high availability for use around the world by users around the world. In commercial, a great example is oil and gas. Oil and gas exploration, research, infrastructure, all create enormous volumes of data. And so you need compute resources to refine that data because it's basically raw and has to be refined. Some of it for analysis for R&D or research and exploration, some of it for monitoring infrastructure, which you're constantly monitoring infrastructure, and you have to be constantly evaluating the data to make sure that there's no issues that need to be immediately addressed out in a lot of times in the middle of nowhere, which is where production infrastructure for oil and gas organizations exists. It runs for hundreds and thousands of miles across areas that are fairly uninhabited. So you can use IoT to monitor the infrastructure itself, the environment around it, such as seismic events, and bring that data back to a location, an edge location via satellite, run your applications for analysis and monitoring, and report appropriately to those who need that data and or have to take action. And then space, we already talked about SSA, traffic management, debris management, space weather, all create a significant amount of data that needs constant analysis and reporting out to end users and interested parties. And
LEOcloud would be able to host those kind of capabilities, right?
Correct. So in our strategy, we have two phases. Phase one, which we're working on today. We're working on both, but we're moving into demonstration here shortly, is to move the edge compute from the centralized locations out to the edge, which for space, what we define as space edge is co-location at ground stations. So a ground station becomes a data center basically with direct access to satellite source data, whether that data is coming from satellite data suppliers who provide imaging and monitoring data, or from data that's being collected from other regions of the world and is brought back to a single location for analysis. Enterprise customers bring their applications to our environment. So we want to be a public cloud environment, both at the space edge and space edge LEO, so that end users that today use any of the global public cloud service providers can seamlessly move their applications into our space edge environments and run them with the same predicted behavior and performance as if they were running in a centralized location, with the benefit of you're reducing the latency to refine the data from raw to actionable, and you're reducing your data transport costs for high volumes of data that once you've done the analysis, you can expect to throw away basically half of that data. So your volume of data is greatly reduced once it's refined. So there's cost, but latency is the key driver for edge computing. And edge compute, it has the ability for mission critical scenarios and operations for business and government. But edge computing is also, we see it in our daily lives. When we stream, when we use a video streaming service, for example, and you get the circle that's going around, that's latency and delay. So organizations move edge compute capabilities out closer to the users into, for example, tier 2 cities or smaller cities or less populated regions in order to reduce and eliminate the latency associated with, in this example, with video streaming.
By hosting the edge computing algorithms on either of your platforms, they could provide actionable solutions with the raw data that they have, and discard any useless data, conserving bandwidth and utilizing less volume. So that in turn could end up saving companies thousands of dollars by running that volume with more efficient data that they'll be sending down.
That's right. It comes back to latency and data transport costs. Data in motion costs money. So the more you're moving, the more expensive it is. The more data you're moving back to a centralized location, the longer it takes to derive results or transform data into information. I think of it in those terms. So if you move out to the edge, you're reducing the volume of data because you're running your applications, and these are enterprise organizations' applications. They bring them into our facilities because they develop their AI and their analytics around their business needs. We give them the environment to run them and as close to their data and users as possible. So by moving that application out to the edge, yes, you reduce the data transport costs for high volumes of data, and you reduce the latency associated with transforming data into information.
That's really incredible. In terms of further out, so moving towards cislunar lunar development, bandwidth is of high importance, because the current systems move at maybe megabits of data. So having some sort of solution like yours to be able to run edge computing algorithms, could you speak a little bit about how your system can help with cislunar applications?
Yeah, absolutely. So we anticipate there'll be edge compute resources in cislunar in orbit around the moon and on the moon. So you now have the compute resources and data storage, because that's always associated with compute, to again transform data into information, versus that information having to in high volume come all the way back to Earth for analysis, which would take days. So the advantages are enormous, and in a lot of situations will be mission critical and life-saving, in that if you're analyzing space weather, for example, and you have to, and you're constantly monitoring the behavior and events on the sun, you need that information being analyzed locally on the moon. You can't be backhauling all that data to Earth for analysis. So just as you upload applications on Earth, you would upload your applications to the moon, a software application, via what I expect to be an optical connection. Now you're, instead of megabits, tens of megabits, you're talking hundreds of megabits and eventually gigabit of bandwidth available. So you can move applications from Earth to the moon in that manner. And you can also bring the results back to Earth as well, because you always want to distribute the data once it's refined as well. Spaceborne 2, which ran on ISS, is a very good example of that, where the DNA sequencer, I believe it is referred to, they reduced the analysis from days to hours. And that's just an excellent proof point of the benefits of moving edge computing out to where the sources and users of data are, and they will be on the moon. So they have to have local edge compute cloud service capabilities.
That's incredible. And to talk a little bit about LEOcloud, how long has the company been around, and what are you guys' plans for the future?
So we are a very early stage. We formed the company in February officially, after a few months of really analyzing and looking into the marketplace and having conversations for about 4 months or so. We formulated the value proposition around space edge, where we co-locate edge compute with our ground station partners and work with the global cloud service providers to give them a presence at the space edge, so their customers can seamlessly move their applications out to a space edge. So we formulated the value proposition around 2 phases: space edge and then space edge LEO, where we move the edge compute capability onto a satellite network. So we're beginning to design a satellite and a satellite data center, basically, and have architected our constellation for a low Earth orbit constellation to provide data center resources or edge compute capability for users with the resources in low Earth orbit. And then beyond that, we've already begun thinking about how this will then move on to cislunar.
Are there any other major players that are looking at similar applications for cloud and space?
Well, yes, there are. There are a number of what we refer to as more focused applications. There's a lot of activity around Earth observation and the processing of data to information for Earth observation applications. We can support that. Again, it's an application to us running within our infrastructure. We think we're taking a much broader perspective in that we're looking at it from a public cloud services offering, which in our opinion brings this capability available to a much wider number of market segments. So any user of public cloud today can use our public cloud offering in the future for any type of application, whether it's analysis, AI-based or analytics-based analysis, or transaction-based services as well.
Great. And as an early stage startup entering the space industry, in general terms, how has the capital raising process been for you?
It's going well. We have a lot of conversations that interest and belief in the opportunities, the investment opportunities for commercial space, and what I call the long tail of opportunity, because there's just so much. It's going to become critical infrastructure just like we have on Earth today, and there'll be constant investment and innovation. We, as a early stage, our challenge is to one, express the value of our proposition, express the interest from potential users, but while we're still in a very early stage of the company, so we've made progress towards moving forward, and we're confident we'll have the funding that we need to fully execute our vision and strategy.
Wonderful. So there's been a pretty good reception from investors and the capital markets in general for investing in space. You see all
Yeah.
these reports, saying that things are looking positive, but someone who's living it and experiencing, fairly recent at the moment. I'd love to get your perspective from that.
Yes, we a lot of enthusiasm. There's a lot of positive feedback regarding our value proposition and strategy, and and the ecosystem that we'll work with, from ground station providers to cloud services providers. There's a clear understanding of the demand and absolute necessity there will be for our types of services. Taking the strategy of being a public cloud, is the investors understand that that broadens the addressable market for us significantly, and by giving an experience in space as you would have terrestrially. So, but investors all focus in different areas of life cycles of a business. So we've spoken to many that will look at us and see, well, in later stages, you're going to be very interesting to us, and we definitely want to have a conversation again at that point. And then there's others that are very focused on the stage of that our company is right now, in the pre-seed, basically, or pre-revenue, and we've captured the interest of, and we see ourselves moving forward. So a lot of enthusiasm out there, a lot of willingness to invest in innovation, I would say.
Well, that's great. And a topic for my course that I recently graduated in commercial space studies is, the big question in the course is, has there been a paradigm shift, shifting from, mainly government driving innovation to is the commercial sector and the private sector now currently driving innovation? So that's fairly why, I ask, what's the capital market involvement? Because if investors are interested, then that means that companies are producing profits for those investors and returning on those investments, and that there is going to be a shift from government driving that innovation to commercial and private. Another topic that we cover in the podcast in every episode is, what makes a great leader in this industry?
Well, so before I go to that, I do want to, you made a very good point that the dynamics have changed, and the government has, as you said, has historically driven new technologies into the commercial marketplace. They're doing that today. But at the same time, there's significant private investment, and part of it is because the government across many organizations is going to become consumers or customers of all the new space, commercial space businesses. So and investors always want to see a balance of commercial and government customers. So the dynamics has changed a little bit, but the government's still actively involved in driving the innovation. But they're also now going to be a significant customer of the services that will come online in the future.
Yeah. What do you think makes a great leader in this industry?
So I've always had in my latter years of my career, a pretty straightforward philosophy of leading from a consensus management, that you want to bring out the creativity in your team to the greatest extent possible, and let them think without boundaries, basically. I sometimes when I'm problem solving or discussing something with somebody, I'll talk about thinking around the edges. So trying to push away from the core data in front of you, the core focus, and think around as much as possible. So to me, one of the most important assets that a company has is the creativity within their team. Probably critical. So a leader, you need to facilitate that and enable it to the use of it to be made as maximized as possible. But I've kind of shifted it to there's that. That's leaders do. They get the most out of their team. They enable their team to grow. They push the boundaries of their team, et cetera. But fundamentally, if you're innovating and solving problems as a leader. If that's where your core capability is, you're gonna have a team that really wants to work for you, because if you're solving problems and innovating, you're doing some really interesting dynamic stuff. And so I think that's where you've got to, that's how you get teams to get really energized around moving a vision and a strategy forward.
I think that's an incredible answer. So from the audience, what kind of people do you want reaching out to you that are listening to the podcast or watching us right now? They have a genuine interest in you, but what kind of people do you want to hear from the audience?
Most interested in people that feel that they can be part of our ecosystem. We mentioned a couple examples: ground station partners, cloud service provider partners. We have other partners that want to create application development environments in space to create a new application economy or a space economy for applications, just like we have on our mobiles. So I always believe there's more innovation out there than we all can see right in front of us or think about over the horizon. So I'm always interested in conversations with people that can add a layer of innovation, capability, value into a service offering, because we really want to be kind of in the middle and bringing services together, whether it's from the physical layer up to the application and anything in between, so that from an end user perspective, it's the best experience possible, the most secure experience, the highest availability experience. So, and there's things I've experienced that in the last couple of weeks at the two shows I was at. I just had a unplanned bump into some people conversation and learned of a security feature that I thought was incredible, that was just completely disruptive, and hopefully they'll bring it to market. And I'm looking for ways to integrate it. And so you never know what you're going to hear next conversation or next elevator ride.
Wonderful. All right. Dennis, thank you for joining us today. It's been a great conversation, and you shared a lot of value and a lot of expertise in your area. And I look forward to having you back again. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And Daniel, thank you for launching this. I think it's really going to be a great series for the industry. And I wish you all the best, and happy to facilitate guests to come on for you in the future. Just give me a shout.
All right, everyone. This is another episode of the Final Frontier podcast. If you want to subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Apple Podcasts, or catch up on following shows or past shows, you can watch us at thefinalfrontierpodcast.com, and we're across all different kind of podcast platforms as well as YouTube. So I want to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.